All right, the next thing we're going to do is add some grids so we can locate the walls using those grids. We're going to base the grid sizing on one of the images that I gave you. If I gave you an image of a section that says that the distance between those 2 points is 4.26 meters. So that is this distance here. So we're going to grid out 4.26 meters with some grid lines. And to do that, I'm going to come over to my Architecture tab, and on the right hand side is Grid. And I'm going to zoom in on the right hand side of this. I'm going to pick kind of close to the middle of this wall, just outside the wall on the image, and left click and drag that over until it's outside the wall over here, and left click. Then I'm going to left click on the 1 and change that to an A and enter for it to accept that. And then I'm going to go to modify to stop that command. Now, verify that the line is in the center of the wall or as close as you can get it. So I'm just going to left click on it and move it up a little bit. And that's pretty good right there. Now, you want to make sure that the grid line is selected. So if it's not, come into the modify up here and then select the grid line by hovering over the line and picking it. And then we're going to go to copy and make sure multiple is selected, and we're going to copy it down that 4.26 meters. So I'm just going to left click over here on the left hand side and drag directly vertically down and type in 4260 because we're working in millimeters. Then I'm going to drag down again and 4260. And if you wanted to, you could stop this copy command by going to modify, select the C grid line and click copy, and use the B grid line to the C grid line as an offset, so you don't have to type in all of those numbers. Now once we're done with that, we're going to zoom in and we're going to see that this is pretty close to the middle of that wall, but I would like it to be exactly there. So we're going to scale the image to match the grid lines, because the image you never kind of know, but you know the grid lines are correct. So I'm going to select the image and I'm going to unpin it. And if select pinned elements is on, I'm going to have to turn that off and then select it and unpin it. And then I'm going to go to the scale and I'm going to pick a point on this A grid line. So I'm just going to left click on it, and then I'm going to go directly vertically down and pick a point as close as I can get to sort of the center of this wall on the image. And then I'm going to pick my third point on that grid line, and it's going to rescale that image. So now we have the image scaled to accommodate those grid lines. Now the next grid line that we want to do are the ones that go across. So if I go to Architecture, Grid, I'm going to pick start it down here below the image, about right there, and then I'm just going to pull this guy up vertically. And I'm going to change this to a 1, enter, select modify to stop that command, and then I'm going to come in and move this grid line to the middle of that wall. So select it, move it to the middle, right? And then I'm going to use the array command, and it's going to work pretty well except for the numbering. So I'm going to go to array, and I'm going to make sure to select last, right? And then I'm going to pick on the first grid line, and then I'm going to move it to about the middle of this wall, because I know that's where the last sort of grid portion is. And then I'm going to go to the modify, stop the array command, and pick that and move it about to the middle of there. Okay, now I can now come in, and because it's an array, I can pick that and I can say, let's change that to 7, and I know that that is about right. You can see it's hitting pretty much evenly along those until it gets to there. Now the only thing that is a difficulty is that it hasn't numbered them correctly, and I don't know the distance. So I'm just going to go to my annotate, and I'm going to go to aligned, and I'm going to left click and then left click on nothing, right? So that's about 5323. I'm going to say that 5330 is going to be our number. And so what I'm going to do is, having used this to figure out what that distance is, I'm going to Control Z back until I just have my 1, grid right there. And then I'm going to select it and I'm going to pick the array command, and instead of last I'm going to pick second. And I'm going to pick there and I'm going to say 5330, right? And that's about right. I could also move it over a little bit, but now what I can do is I can come in and I can pick that array and I can say, instead of 2 down here, I can say 7, right? And it marches that guy out to that center of that wall, and I get the correct numbering. So there's a couple of different ways you can work on these grid lines and get them in. Now I'm going to go down here and I'm going to select the raster image and pin it again because I unpinned it to scale it. And then I'm going to change the selection set down here to do not select pinned elements, so I'm not constantly selecting that. Now I'm going to pick this grid, and it's actually in an array. So if I want to modify it, I have to edit the group and then pick it and pull that guy down if I want those to be longer, and then finish that, and it'll do the rest of them. At this point you can actually pick all of these grids, so I'm just going to come up here and do a crossing box across all this stuff right at the top there, and I'm going to filter out everything but the model groups. And you can actually ungroup those if you want to, so it's no longer an array, right? So now they're just back to the grids and not the array itself. Okay, so when we come back we'll do the levels.